The field of mindfulness is experiencing some challenges, and some of those challenges come from our own habits around competition instead of openness and collaboration. Hi, my name is Ted Meissner. Welcome to Mindfulness Voyage. And today we're going to be speaking with an expert in this field of innovation within the field of mindfulness. Please do remember to tap that subscribe button. Thanks so much, and let's speak with today's guest.
Our guest today is Mo Edjlali. Mo, welcome to the podcast. Good to have you here.
Excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Ted.
I am so glad you are with us today. And for those who may not be aware of this, in full disclosure, Mo and I go way back. And one of the things that I really love about this man is that we have wonderful and deep agreements. We have wonderful and deep disagreements. And what we have throughout that is because we care. And that is one of just the most encouraging things, even when we're on opposite sides of stuff. So, Mo, thank you so much for being here. And maybe you could say just a little bit about who you are and what you do with Mindful Leader.
Sure, but first, Ted, I want to say the feeling is mutual. So just want to be clear about that. Always appreciate our conversations and excited for folks to get to kind of listen in on the kind of conversations we've had for years. So a little bit about Mindful Leader. We are started the organization over a decade ago. And initially with this focus on workplace and leadership, we hosted the first Mindful Leader Summit, and we are now in our 10th year of doing the summit where we gather extraordinary leaders, business leaders, and scientists and researchers and practitioners, folks out in the field and trenches doing this work, and provide it back to the community to help them figure out how to do the same. Since then, we've continued to expand and do different things. One piece I'm really excited about that, Ted, you played a critical role in is in teaching our first live online MBSR course using this funny technology called Zoom that nobody knew about. We talked and planned on that for almost a year, launched in February of 2020, when everyone thought, teaching MBSR on Zoom, like, how can you dare do that? Like, oh my God, that's not allowed. And then March happened and everyone turned to us and started asking, how are you doing that? Like, how can we learn from that? And with that, over the last 5 years, Mindful Leader has become the largest provider of MBSR in the world. We've taught thousands of people globally, 300 some classes taught, and really, really excited about that. We've continued to do the summit, so that's going on. At the same time, in 2019, we launched our Certified Workplace Mindfulness Facilitator program, which was MBSR based, helping people learn how to bring these practices into the workplace in a way that made sense. And we've been fortunate enough to have 550 some alumni, people from Headspace, the US Army, from Hilton, Starbucks, Navy Federal, all sorts of organizations across the board. We launched another thing called Meditate Together to really encourage being able to meditate with other human beings during the pandemic. And now we've created a web-based app, which is soon to be on iOS. And it's almost a Zoom-like experience where you meditate with other people on the hour, 24 hours a day, 5 days a week. We've got the ability to meditate with others, 20 minutes of silence and meditation practices that really help people learn how to meditate on their own and guide themselves. What else? We've got a lot going on.
You got
We've
this
got the
thing in the
newsletter.
background behind you, this
Oh yeah.
new book you got
The
too.
whole yes. Whew, forgot about the book. Thanks, Ted. So we got a book out. Got approached by Wiley a few years ago to do a book, and it took me quite some time to figure out what made sense. Decided to do Open MBSR, and kind of combining two hats I've worn for a while. So with Mindful Leader, got a chance to connect with some of the key critics of mindfulness 6, 7 years ago, and really found just like my aperture expanded, like just hearing their thoughts and their perspective, their outside ideas. And it was like thrilling and exciting. And it felt to me like we needed more of that in our field. And so about 6 years ago, I started writing a series called Whackfulness, kind of exploring the unexamined side of mindfulness and bringing a critical voice. On the other side, we were the largest MBSR provider in the world. We've really helped pioneer workplace mindfulness. And so the book is the attempt of bringing those two opposite hats together, and instead of just talking about problems and just having these things that we offer, really addressing those problems in a way that could help the field forward. So that is something I'm super excited about that we have out there as well.
Yeah, that's a lot. And one of the things that is what I admire about you is that because you have a different history and a different background, there isn't quite the same attachment to how we have taught secular heavier weight programs like MBSR and MBCT in the past. And you've looked forward towards what are ways we can make this more accessible for people? What are innovations that we can bring into this space? And yeah, one of those very well timed was our first time through with the first live online MBSR for Mindful Leader. I'd been doing that on my own and at UMass for a while, and that's grown tremendously and was a necessary thing for COVID during the pandemic, is people needing to shift to do things that are uncomfortable and new and nonetheless allow this to continue and to enable people to be able to encounter mindfulness and MBSR in a structured way with well-trained teachers. And there's still lots going on. The environment in which mindfulness is finding itself has changed, not just for mindfulness. The whole world has been undergoing tremendous changes and selective pressures on our evolutionary trajectory. And so I'm curious, from your point of view, what are some things that you would like to see more of in the near future within the field of mindfulness?
It's a great question. And I want to go back because just as you were talking about the live and online, what became clear to me, you and Mindful Leader, we were proactive before kind of, the blank hit the fan. I don't know if I'm allowed to say bad words on your podcast, but we were proactive, and often there is sort of this reactive kind of way of doing things. And to me, it does feel often in this field, because of the way that it's structured, it is very reactive instead of kind of thinking ahead and looking ahead. We all know the power of now and being present now, but that doesn't mean we can't think about the future and plan for the future and adapt and consider these things. But I think what comes up for me is that it's not only this element of being proactive, being reactive, but it's almost like this defensiveness and this kind of like stagnation where over the decade that I've been involved in this sphere, very rarely would you see meaningful debate. Very rarely would you see meaningful critique. And it felt like I'm just naturally a contrarian, a provocateur. I have fun with it, and we have fun conversations. I like to challenge people to think differently and to consider things maybe they hadn't. And I do so because I find for me that's one of the most valuable things someone could do for me. And so to challenge things that I might have deeply held beliefs around. And when you have a field where it sometimes feels like an echo chamber, where everyone's kind of just congratulating each other, agreeing with each other, or when you have these weird dynamics where you have these sacred cows, like people who you cannot challenge, people that are sort of beyond being challenged for, maybe there's a belief that they're superhumans and they're sort of superior people. And because of this practice and that, they've reached this level of which we can only imagine. And so we need to think and treat and act differently with them. And I find that all these things have created this environment in which we're not evolving and that we're slipping into irrelevance. And worse than that, I believe that there are some foundational elements in our field that have created a lack of trust and a lack of resilience and sort of a fragility that, and in some cases, even mental instability, which is the opposite of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and this is the area I want to really spend a little bit of caring attention with, is the challenges that you see, you've encountered, that I see I've encountered, that are very similar kinds of experiences we've had on this. And it's not just within the field of mindfulness. So I want to be clear for those who are watching this is we're not just poking the bear of mindfulness. In many areas of our lives, we're seeing the same kind of things that you're describing here of a respect for authority that is more than respect for authority. It's maybe an unhealthy uh, bending to authority. And there's also a lip service to questioning. It's good to question, but as long as the answer you come up with is this. And that's not necessarily so, and especially when, as an innovator, as you are, that can really be rough because there can be a very difficult time to stretch our minds, to see this otherwise unknown future or a different way of doing things. So I'm wondering from your perspective what some of the difficulties, some of the challenges you're seeing within the field, and what do you want to see different?
Yeah, just as you were saying that, Ted, some things popped up in my mind. There was a gentleman, I might say his name wrong, Anand Gutierrez. He wrote a book called Winner Take All, and he talked about, and this was like maybe 6 years ago, so it's been some time, where he said the most powerful people in the world are the least accountable that they've ever been. And just like, whoa, like when you look at how that was 6 years ago, when you look at things now, in terms of just generally speaking, it certainly feels like that. Kind of this inequality gap is increasing, and I think there's some truth to that within our field as well, as people sort of having unchallenged sort of power and domination. We've got this polarization where one-dimensional thinking, kind of black and white thinking, which is quite natural for human beings and for us to do. Yet on that, we have this compounded effect of social media algorithms that are really geared towards every day sort of pulling us further and further apart from folks who disagree with us and into these echo chambers. And I feel we also have this kind of like capitalism taking over everything. And I have mixed feelings about capitalism. Like I'm not anti-capitalist. I'm not pro. I'm sort of like it's working and it has its flaws. But I think unbound capitalism, everyone could agree to, is quite dangerous. And for me, when it creeps into spirituality and we start having like spirituality for sale, that is really concerning. And I mean, I want to use concerning might not be the right word. It creates a feeling of disgust internally for me.
Yeah. Yeah, and the difficulty with this is shifting that tide and that trajectory can be really difficult because it takes so many people and so much intention. And if you're not actually flying in formation, you're not going to get anywhere. And this is one of the challenges that you and I have talked about before is around this idea of there's so much competition right now that it's hard for us to move the needle from conflict to competition, which can be friendly or not so friendly, to collaboration, a little more short term, but at least there's a little bit of coming together, all the way to true collaboration, which is where I'd like us to go. But we're in so much of a habit of being competitive with one another. So I'm wondering what some thoughts of yours, and I think this open access concept, and you can say a little bit about that as one of a few tools we might do to shift that tide a little bit. So if you could say a little bit more about
Yes.
that.
Well, just one thing that's coming up, Ted, like I don't have any problem with competition, right? Like I'm assistant coach for my kids' soccer team and I remind them, I'm like, who are you competing against? And what the answer I'm looking for is with myself. And really every game, everyone else, like it's really just a way to help us test our limits and improve and learn things about ourselves. And there's a term, I want to say it's from the tech world, of co-opetition, where it's like, hey, we could cooperate and we could compete. Dialectic, right? Like, so back to this one-dimensional thinking. In the book, I explore this idea of like dialectic, two opposing ideas at the same time. So I want to encourage us to think about like, yeah, we could compete and we could collaborate. And if we could shift our thinking in that direction, like extraordinary possibilities open up. And I think again, like a lot of great examples are within the tech world. I'd argue that the tech world has its problems, techno-feudalism, like monopolistic behavior, abuses of power, all sorts of terrible things. And I don't want to get into that and the possibilities of AI accelerating all sorts of things. That's for another conversation. But I think you could fairly argue that the tech world has learned how to really bring together and unify collective human intelligence and potential in ways that no one ever has in human history. Just like how they're able to kind of pull people together globally and unite them and organize them and get them all contributing towards shared goals. And and that has really influenced me. I've always been fascinated by open source, like this idea that software, which is where this idea really originated, can be completely open to anyone to take, to modify, to build off of. And you recreate these robust ecosystems where people are able to make a living, but it's not around control or this kind of proprietariness of the source code, but it's around services, adaptations, and ways in which you then take that and make it useful in service to other people.
Yeah. So we could talk and have talked in the past for hours, and I want to be respectful of your time and for folks who are listening or watching this. So I'd like to wrap up with one final question about your insights. If you were to share something with those who are watching or listening here, something perhaps for those in the mindfulness field that you think may be helpful to move us all forward, for them to keep in mind and heart for all of us, what might that be?
What comes up for me, Ted, and probably the simplest thing is what is your vision for the future of mindfulness? I think everyone needs to ask themselves that. Like where do you see things going? Like how do you see things developing? And for me, I want things to be multi-generational. Like I want this to be resilient. I want this to be the extraordinary impact mindfulness has had on my life. I would hate for that to get lost in the noise and sort of the, I'm going to say charade, it's a strong word, but kind of the charade that's happening out there. It feels very performative. It feels very commercialized. And again, I think there's appropriate and inappropriate ways to do that. And for me, the original excitement, the original promise of mindfulness is what drew me in. This idea that there's this secular practice and beliefs that I could do on my own and do in community, and that these things help me to better understand my mind and what's happening inside and how I show up and how I interact and experience and perceive the world and those around me. It feels like we're in a dangerous place where that might get lost. And it feels that unfortunately often we have these moments in history where things kind of progress and then take a step back, progress and take a step back. And I was thinking about this, like it does feel like there's been these waves of mindfulness excitement in the US, sort of, Krishnamurti and his organization way back. And then you had Alan Watts and the Maharishi, and then you had like the Sexy Sadie Beatles sort of explosion, and then everyone kind of pulled back, and then you had the John Kabat-Zins, Jack Cornfields, and folks, and then more of the and now more modern like the Deepak Chopras and others, and it feels like we have these waves where we pull forward and then we pull back. But for me, the promise of mindfulness is what got me excited. Like this idea that we could unite and that we could practice together and that we could do things in ways that would ultimately help us individually but collectively. It feels like something's gotten lost. It feels like there is this entanglement with Buddhism in ways that feels like it needs to be addressed. And if we don't, it feels deceptive. It feels like there's this one-dimensional thinking of, just let go, do nothing, just be generous without counterbalance and oversimplified thinking that could lead to people not developing emotional maturity and kind of having tunnel vision. And we have this almost oligarchical, elitist sort of vibe sometimes that comes with our field where people are revered, not necessarily for what they've done, not for what they've contributed, but for who they know. And ideas like lineage and transference that don't necessarily make sense to secular folks like myself.
Well, for those who are here, thank you for tuning in. I will have several links for you where the links are found on the platform you're using. Our guest today, Mo Edjlali. Mo, thank you so much for being here. Glad to talk with you today.
Thanks, Ed. It's been a real pleasure. And if folks are curious, they can find out more about us at mindfulleader.org if they're curious about any of the stuff that we shared. Thanks, Ted.
Thank you so much for being here today. Again, as a reminder, if you would please tap on that subscribe button. It does make a very big difference, and I appreciate the help. Remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can, and I'll see you again soon on Mindfulness Voyage.